I'm very excited about today's topic of parchment paper.
Woohoo!
Which admittedly sounds like a very weird thing to say, but I have found it very helpful in being more independent, and I think others might find this information useful as well. I'll share that in a minute, but the other reason that I am excited about making a video about parchment paper is because, of course, I need to show myself using the parchment paper, which means I need to make cookies.
Yum, 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 yum.
Hi, I'm Amy on A Lolly Life, and you are in the right place. I'm so happy that you're here. First, we're going to discuss what parchment paper is and how it is different than wax paper. Then I will cover the most common reason why people love parchment paper, and I will finish with my favorite reason to have parchment paper and why I have parchment paper on auto delivery from Amazon so that hopefully I will never run out. Parchment paper is not wax paper. Wax paper will smoke and brown in the oven, and it will leave a waxy residue on your pans and things. Plus, that smoke will affect the taste of your food. It is possible to use wax paper in the oven. You just have to use it very, very carefully, and you have to know what you're doing. You can't use them the same way that you use parchment paper in the oven to put it under your cookies or things, because it doesn't work the same way. Depending on how you use the wax paper, there is the possibility that you could catch it on fire in the oven. And I know this because well, I know this. Tell me in the comments below if you've ever caught something on fire in the oven. I could actually use to hear a few of those stories to make me feel better about some of my very dumb baking experiences over the years. I use wax paper to separate items that I'm freezing so that I can pop them apart after they're frozen, and I use it to put no-bake cookies on and when I'm making chocolates. You can also use wax paper to cover your food in the microwave to keep it from splattering. I tried using parchment paper in between foods that I was freezing because I didn't have any wax paper at the time, thinking that the parchment paper would work just as well, and it did not work just as well. The parchment paper stuck to the food, and I could not get it off of the food until it was basically completely thawed. You can peel wax paper off of frozen things, but you do have to put 2 layers between your food items. Like if you're making hamburgers, you have to have 2 layers between so that you can pop them apart, and then you can peel the wax paper off. If you only use 1 sheet, they will stick together. Now, a really obvious and probably the most common reason that people think parchment paper is wonderful is because your cakes and cookies do not stick to the pan. They simply bake better and turn out more consistently when you use parchment paper. But what about silicone, you may ask? It's reusable and therefore better for the earth. Well, I'm not going to argue with the idea that a silicone mat gives you a smaller carbon footprint. But that is the only area that silicone actually works better. And only a little bit better because you can actually reuse parchment paper a few times. I will use the same sheet of parchment paper over and over until I'm finished with what I'm baking for the day. If I'm making cookies or multiple batches of cookies, then I will continue to use the same sheet of parchment paper. If it gets a little bit greasy, I just use a rag and wipe it off. I would not recommend saving a piece of parchment paper for a week or for days to reuse it, but I have used a piece of parchment paper all day long while I was cooking a ton of cookies, and then that night I used it again to make mozzarella bites in the oven. Silicone is more slippery than parchment paper, and so your cookies and things tend to spread too much. When cookies or things spread more, they rise less, which makes them denser and, well, drier. Heat is conducted differently through silicone, and that can often affect the quality of what you're baking. Also, silicone doesn't really breathe. So the bottoms of cookies and things that you bake on silicone end up with a damp, greasy quality. Parchment paper will absorb some of that oil. If I'm going to put the effort into baking something, then it sure better turn out so no steamy, greasy bottoms to my cookies. Parchment paper. This is the parchment paper that we purchase on Amazon. I like it because it's pre-cut, and so it's really easy to just unfold it and put it on the cookie sheet. However, depending on what you need the parchment paper for, it might be necessary to have parchment paper without any folds. And I have included a link in the description for the parchment paper that we use and for another one that does not have the folds. They are about the same price per sheet, but the ones without folds fit differently in the drawer, and since we have kind of a small kitchen, I went with the one that fits in the drawer well. Well, this way, yeah. The other thing that I do is I tear the flaps off on the end so that I can very easily just pull a piece of parchment paper out. It just makes it super speedy. Now for my favorite reason to have parchment paper. It makes it easier to clean up. But it's more than just that. If you have a child with autism or with other problems that makes it a little bit more difficult to function as an adult, then this is particularly wonderful. It allows them to function more independently because it takes some of the responsibility out of cooking. The cleanup part is so much easier. You just throw it in the trash. Plus, let's be real honest. There are plenty of days where I have zero desire to function as an adult. Anything that helps keep the kitchen cleaner with less work is a winner in my book. I personally do not love pizza rolls or other freezer-to-oven dinner things, but if you have people in your house that do enjoy pizza rolls and mozzarella bites and things like that, then I'm going to guess that they probably do not enjoy doing the dishes. To make matters worse, our cookie sheets don't fit in the dishwasher. I think that's a pretty common problem. So you know what you end up with? Dirty dishes that need to be hand washed. And they just sit there for days on end sometimes, waiting to be washed. If you put a piece of parchment paper down before the pizza rolls, then just like magic, you can toss the piece of parchment paper and put the cookie sheet back in the cupboard without washing it. Although I would look both directions before you do that because that will completely gross some people out. But they are the people who don't always have a sink and counter full of dirty dishes. I have a video, or I will soon, I actually think it comes out next week, on why it is so hard for some people to function as an adult. I use parchment paper as my prime example on how to enable yourself and others to function better and more independently. When that video comes out, it will be in the corner for you to watch. Until then, I have another great video in the corner for you to watch. Your efforts are being noticed. Even if no one else notices, God notices how hard you're trying. Keep trying. You are accomplishing more than you think. Be safe and be good, and I'll see you on the next episode of Lolly Life.